The $110 million that you all helped appropriate was a one-shot deal. These monies are supposed to be utilized, this biennium through 2009, and we hope that the legislative bodies see it fit to continue with this program. And we're hoping that with the testimony that you hear, not only in Brownsville but throughout the state of Texas, that you will convince your colleagues to also continue to support this. I share the thought that a lot of folks in the east, west, and north part of the state, not because they don't want to know, they're just not aware of what goes on in our border. Let me touch a little bit now as Cameron County judge and the issue of the border wall and border security. In Cameron County, I will speak for myself because I do not. We haven't had enough public hearings locally to hear what the sentiment is, other than nobody on the border wants the wall. But I was telling Representative Oliveira last night that once you leave the border area, there's a preponderance of folks throughout this country that think a border wall is the answer. We have provided the federal government an alternative to the border wall, at least in South Texas and along the Rio Grande border. And we have been professing this for months and months and months, and that is the restoration and the restructuring of our levee system. We believe that is a lot more important than building a wall. We believe that reinforcing our levee system, which Hidalgo County has already begun a process by floating a $100 million bond issue for their residents. However, a very small part of that is being utilized for the levee system. So Senator Cornyn was here a few weeks ago where we toured the levee system. We had a meeting in FAR whereby the 4 or 5 major players, all the stakeholders, came together. This should have happened a long time ago, but it finally happened a few weeks ago where we had FEMA, we had Army Corps of Engineers, we had the federal government, we had local officials talk about an alternative to the levee, to the wall. So with that, I would like to ask you all to support our endeavors in terms of supporting the renourishment, the rebuilding of the levee system. If we do that, the need for a wall is going to be diminished significantly. Senator Cornyn has called for a moratorium on the construction of this wall until IBWC provides a study to us to see what the impact of the levee system will do in terms of maybe eliminating the wall altogether. The wall's not going to work. It's not a one-size-fits-all, and that may work in the deserts of Arizona. We don't believe that it's going to work in the tropical paradise of South Texas. So we're hoping to do that. So with that, I offer myself any questions that y'all might have at this time. If not, I would like to pass the microphone to Colonel Davis. I had the opportunity to sit on the DPS Commission for 2 years, where I became acutely aware of what the challenges are in terms of not only border security, but law enforcement along our border. With him is also Jack Collies, who's the Director of Emergency Management, and they can provide probably more specific answers to some of your questions at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Colonel Davis.
Mr. Chairman, can I?
I'm sorry, please.
The restoration of, Judge, thank you. The restoration of the levee system, will that also go to protect, our residents against storm surges from the Gulf of Mexico?
Representative Lucio, you were probably a twinkle in somebody's eye when Beulah.
The senator's eye, not somebody's eye.
Somebody's eye. The senator's eye. When Hurricane Beulah hit about 40 years ago, and I've used this scenario before, and I hope I don't bore you all too much with this, but it's something that we have to factor in. And every hurricane season, we talk about, this is the year that South Texas is going to get hit. And we almost did. If you all remember Hurricane Dean, I'll never forget, Saturday afternoon, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I think it was August the 18th, that hurricane had a direct line of sight to Brownsville, Texas, and that's when the state of Texas began right before that, mobilizing. Go back and think about 40 years ago, and Renee and I talked about this last night again, and we talked a lot for 5 minutes, but we talked about what Beulah did 40 years ago, coming up. It made landfall somewhere around the mouth of the Rio Grande River, and it basically made its way up the river and dumped bucket loads of water through South Texas. For those of y'all that are old enough to know, none of y'all sitting there, I might add, Harlingen was underwater for weeks. Brownsville, Cameron County, Willacy, Hidalgo County. This was 40 years ago when 281 was a thriving farming community. Today, those fields of sorghum and grain and cotton and sugar cane are now subdivisions. I just went to another groundbreaking just last week of another subdivision on 281 that was farmland. So the water has no place to run anymore. So if a hurricane hits South Texas in the same way Beulah did, and it follows that same path, and we do not do anything to restore and renovate our levee system, we will all be underwater, including this campus, because there's nothing to hold it back. If the wall is constructed the way the thoughts are, and there's nothing done to the levee system, that wall will not survive a Category 4 hurricane that comes up the river. So if we go back and reflect on what Hurricane Katrina did to New Orleans, it wasn't the hurricane that did the damage to New Orleans. It was the levee break. It was the breach of the levee system that did the damage to New Orleans. That was $90 billion. If something like that happens in Cameron County, Hidalgo County, Willacy, Starr, South Texas, which we look at this as a region, it's going to be $90 billion is not going to be anything compared to what we've got. So I believe strongly, as I believe for the last 10 months, 11 months, that if we have assistance from the federal government with y'all's help to invest the millions of dollars that they're talking about putting into the wall, refocus it. I told Senator Cornyn that saving tax dollars is somewhat that's foreign to the federal government. And I think that if they decide to reinvest the money in the levee system versus the wall, it does kill two birds with one stone.
Judge, thank you so much for your service, especially with this particular council that we created last legislative session with this appropriation, and clearly, I mean, all of our heart is in the right place, doing the right thing on this. And I just want to ask you a real quick question, because I think that it's my understanding that those dollars for the levy through the federal government are actually in the appropriation budget. I mean, those dollars do exist currently. Is that your understanding?
No, sir. We need about $150 million, and I think what they've allocated is maybe like 30, 40 million, 20 million.
But there are dollars that have not been released from the federal government for repair.
Not in Cameron County. No, sir. I'm not sure what they've done in Hidalgo, but I will tell you that the estimates that we've received to address the levee system from Penitas in Hidalgo County down to Cameron is about $125 to $150 million. That's what we need to address the levee system.
And trust me, I mean, Jack will tell you that sometime way over a year ago we worked on the Cameron County evacuation plan in conjunction with county just prior to your tenure, and Jack having exercised that now, I'm sure he'll speak to that with the approach of Dean showed after action how we can do better and so forth, which is a good thing. But please, if you're in communication with Senator Cornyn, please tell him that we're sorry that he voted for the wall on 2 occasions. We thought that was perhaps not in the best interest of the valley, obviously. Gentlemen, do y'all have any questions? Or you want to go ahead with Colonel Davis?
Yeah, why don't we finish and then we can ask.
Okay, Colonel Davis.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I don't usually correct my former boss, but there are some of us that do remember Beulah, young highway patrolman. I had to go to Laredo to get to Harlingen, and I spent 2 weeks down here. So, and I agree, it was quite a sight back then, and I would not like to see that repeated. Let me take just a couple of minutes to kind of summarize what the last session of the legislature did to DPS, or for DPS, as it relates to border security and the things that we've done since the legislature met. As you may recall, we got 106 commissioned officers that were specifically directed by the legislature to be placed along the border. And that's highway patrolmen, narcotics, motor vehicle theft, criminal intelligence, rangers, and more especially aircraft. And we also received funding for 4 additional helicopters that we're in the process of bidding right now, and we hope by this time next year that all 4 of those will be in place. We've hired part of our pilots, and they're in training, so that's something that is going to be a great benefit to this area. We're currently covering the border operations that we've talked about and the Border Patrol spoke about this morning, and I would tell you that our relation today is better with the federal agencies and the local agencies. As Major Garza had mentioned to me earlier, we've been doing criminal interdiction task forces in this part of the country for a long time, but it's usually individual agencies that are doing that, and it's never been a coordinated effort as we're doing right now. And we're sharing intelligence that is both from a federal level, state level, and someone asked a question about the property a while ago that backs up to the river. We've undertaken a effort to identify those cartels, and if you look at each one of the cities across in Mexico, there's a person there called a gatekeeper that kind of is the head guy that for drugs or things crossing in that area. Those are the same people that are going to be doing what you were talking about earlier about purchasing property and finding new ways to smuggle. I would tell you that I believe from our experience that our apprehensions along Interstate 40 and Amarillo have greatly increased, and I attribute part of that to things that are going along the Texas border and the ease, if that's a good word, of smuggling drugs up through New Mexico and Arizona, and then taking those to Interstate 40 and going across to the East Coast. I'm not saying we've solved the problem in South Texas. As you know, Texas leads the nation in drug seizures every year, and we have for a number of years. And that's because of the quantity that's there, and also I'd like to say that it's due to, I believe, our effort, both at DPS and local agencies, to apprehend that. We've also, in that effort, consolidated our analyst section. Each one of our services, criminal law enforcement, had an analyst section assigned to them. We've combined that where that is a department analytical section that will hopefully address some of the issues that relates to gangs, to narcotics, to smuggling of illegal aliens and also contraband into the United States, and the removal of vehicles to Mexico that are stolen. One of the things we talk about, license plate readers and the ability to identify those are great, but the experience that we're having now is a lot of those vehicles are being stolen Houston, San Antonio, Dallas, and by the time the person wakes up the next morning, they're already into Mexico. We have identified through ICE that there are, vehicles there, but once they get in Mexico, we have a great difficulty in getting them back. So the problem, if you ask the question, how long is it before your vehicle is reported? If Brownsville PD immediately makes a report to NCIC, it's automatically entered there and available for law enforcement officers to check. The problem, as I said, is that you may not know it's stolen for 2 or 3 hours, and by the time that it's entered, it's too late for apprehension. We're experiencing on the state level a great number of what we call bailouts, both north and southbound. If they're southbound, most of the time they're stolen vehicles. If they're northbound, they've either got contraband or they have illegals in them. And the favorite trick is for the coyotes to drive off the road, drive through a fence, and they got 8 or 9 people that are leaving, and 500 pounds of narcotics to them, that's the cost of doing business. So that's really a big problem with us, and the concern for our officers and their safety is a lot of them are out there by themselves, and they're not going to run off in the brush when they just flush 10 or 12 out of a vehicle. Our approach, I suppose, is to try to apprehend the driver first and deal with that person, because usually that's a person that knows the route, that knows the procedures, and is being paid a considerable amount of money to either smuggle the narcotics or the individuals in the United States. We've also established a new ranger company along the border from from Del Rio back through Brownsville or Laredo back through Brownsville. That will be Company G. We created a new position for a captain that's already here in McAllen, and we're looking for office space. We have, in the last month, Jack, appointed 5 Ranger lieutenants, which the last session of the legislature gave us the authority to do. We've assigned those lieutenants temporarily to the JOIC, the Joint Intelligence Task Force along the border, and they're coordinating the efforts of the federal and state and the local agencies as it relates to the law enforcement. Each operation that we conduct along the border, at the onset of that, there is a briefing by either narcotics or intelligence from the department or local agencies as it relates to intelligence about crossings and smuggling in the area. I would hope to say that this is a positive statement, that the operations are based on intelligence as opposed to just saying we're going to get 4 guys together and we're going to work tonight. Hopefully we're doing things that are based on fact, and I think our results are proof that that's occurring. That's really the notes that I had, and I'd be glad to answer any questions, and I'll give Chief Collins an opportunity or respond to your question.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Colonel, for being with us today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've asked this of a few of the groups I've met with in the last couple of days we have met with, and some of these programs, I'm hearing, and I'm glad that we're doing different and new things, but post 9/11, have you seen a significant change in how the DPS does business to respond to the heightened level of threat and the heightened level of necessary security, whether it be on a trooper-by-trooper basis or as an agency? Can you say that, yes, we have responded to this new war on terror, this new, heightened sense of security?
Yes, sir, I think we have. We've redirected the primary mission of our Criminal Intelligence Service. We have all across the state at least one person, and in Houston, Dallas, the bigger cities, more than that, people assigned to the Joint Terrorism Task Force out of the Intelligence Service. We participate in that on a daily basis. We have, in the last 3, maybe 4 years, trained every trooper in the state on recognition of terrorist activity. We have a form that is required to be filled out when there's a suspicious person that's stopped on a traffic violation. That goes to our intelligence service, and if it merits additional investigation, that's done by the Criminal Intelligence Service. We've also made an effort to train as many local officers, and when I say train, that's kind of a misconception. Let me say make available information about how to report. We have a 24-hour intelligence center available in Austin to respond to officers and furnish information on a 7-day-a-week, 365 days a year operation. So I think we have done a considerable amount of preparation in response to that. And
aside from that, in terms of also border security, but also natural disasters, so on and so forth, interoperability, how important is it for you on a community by community basis? I know, if I'm not mistaken, Houston is scheduled to get upwards of $20 million to get to a certain level of interoperability. And down here on the border, we're not only by the border, but we're also on the coast, and we've been labeled as kind of a triple threat in terms of our need for interoperability. I mean, do you see efforts in terms of DPS and the state to get these communities down here to the level of interoperability that is required for safety?
Well, I would tell you that it's my belief on a area basis right now, our troopers, our deputies, and our city officers that work in that particular, let's just say Brownsville, they can communicate with each other. The problem arises when I bring 50 troopers from Amarillo or North Texas down here in response to a storm. What we have to do at that time, and there is a equipment available, and we have some of those equipment. Some of that equipment is computer-based linking of radios. But what I would do, if we had a storm in Brownsville and I brought 50 troopers here, I'd bring a radio technician down here to reprogram my radios. And they're 200-channel programmable radios, but they don't have channels in them. If they're in Amarillo, they don't need Brownsville's channel. But if they come down here, I bring a radio technician here, within a matter of hours, depending on how many units we bring, we can have them talking. Can they all hear the response or the traffic from the PD and the sheriff's office? No, they can't do that. But there would be common channels that we, as state police officers and other state agencies, TxDOT, Parks and Wildlife, Alcohol Beverage Commission, would be able to talk to each other and hear what was going on in an emergency.
I've been told that it would take $12 million for Cameron County to get, roughly, and that could be, the Cadillac cost of that particular initiative, but it would take about $12 million to get all of Cameron County to the level 6. If I'm using the correct terminology, please forgive my, misinformation. If that's what I have, to level 6, meaning all the necessary agencies, whether it be Brownsville PD, Harlingen PD, South Padre Island PD, the county, Port Police, DPS, everyone can communicate with one another. Is that, in your opinion, is that money well spent?
Well, I think it's money well spent. When what you've got to look at is that would probably be purchasing new radios for everybody, and everybody would have the same kind. There is a need for that, but also in an emergency situation, as I just described a few minutes ago, we can talk to each other. Is it the best system? No, it's not. But the federal government, in some of their grant applications, we have a Project 25 standard that is a standard for radios for police and emergency emergency response firefighters and EMS. That Project 25 is what I'm talking about. Those radios are programmable. Where you run into the problem is the city of Houston and the larger areas going to 800 and 900 megahertz, where we're on something less than that. So there is equipment out there that will patch those things through, and that's probably the cheapest way to go. Is $12 million a good investment? Certainly, when you're talking about communications among first responders, if you got the money, certainly I think that's a good expenditure of your funds.
Thank you, Colonel. Representative McGinn.
Thanks, Colonel. What is the status on the 106 FTE commissioned officers? Have they been hired? Are they in training?
We have 185 in school as we speak today, or that was at 5 o'clock yesterday. We have another school scheduled. This school will graduate the first week in March, and we have another school or schools scheduled for then. We have probably, and I'll miss it a little bit, we probably have 130 vacancies in the commission ranks of the agency. We're losing 12 to 15 a month through retirements and people leaving for other jobs. But to answer your question, we have done two things. We've identified the stations where we're going to put the highway patrolmen. We've opened those stations for transfers. If somebody wanted to transfer, and there's one or two in Rio Grande City, let's say, if somebody wanted to transfer there, we'll allow them to transfer if we have someone to backfill their position or have adequate coverage in their area. As these recruits come out of this school, we will assign those people that we need to fill those vacancies if we have a person in that area to train them. And we have a year's field training.
So recruitment hasn't been a problem?
Well, the legislature did a good thing by increasing the salary for our recruits. We instituted a intern program where when a person is accepted to go to work for us, we immediately put them on a payroll at a recruit salary, okay, and bring them to Austin for 3 or 4 days to get them familiar with what's going on there, send them back to the community they came from, allow them to ride with troopers, work the radio, do whatever they can do around the office. We had several people leave police departments and sheriff's office that came to work for us in the intern program because we were paying them more as an intern than the local agencies could pay them. And that's not good for your local agencies. That creates a hardship on them, but, everybody's...
You're nodding.
And they're all sitting behind me now.
You're nodding.
I don't have to help
Well,
you.
if it's not the Fed's rating, it's our
Well, they
state.
rate us, and that's part of the 10 or 12 or 14 that leaves, but we're extremely fortunate in this process, and I think there's a lot of things that occurred. Our people got out and beat the bushes. We've done some other things that will let people, if we have a location that has traditionally been hard to fill, we'll guarantee a person, if they're from Muleshoe, Texas, and that's not a good example, but if they want to go back there, I will promise them that if they graduate from school and there's someone there to train them, or whenever they complete the field training program, they'll be able to go back to that community. That's helped a little bit. We've had a lot of people, probably out of the 206 that we had to start school, we probably had 30 military people that just got out of the military. The intern program was a great help to them because they had a job. And prior to that, they may have to wait 6 months, and a lot of them had gone to work for someone else. So it's a combination of a lot of things, I think, to answer your question, that we've been able to do and will continue to do.
We appropriated some money for command centers along the border.
Right.
What's the status on those, and how do you vision that those are going to work?
Let me let Chief Colley answer that. That's kind of in his area.
We have 6 JOICs. You'll hear that term, Joint Operation Intel Centers. And the will of the legislature was that we had to expend all our available federal dollars before we could access general revenue dollars appropriated by the legislature. So we had to do that. We're in the process of doing that. So we have what we've evolved to is we're really decentralizing this operation along the border to these Joint Operation Intel Centers with the Border Patrol. This is a center that's made up of local law enforcement, federal law enforcement, state law enforcement, and with a Texas Ranger who sits in a unified command slot there to coordinate these efforts. So those they're established now.
They're established now?
They're being set up.
So they're rented buildings,
Not in all cases. We've leveraged in the Border Patrol, for example, with a BIC, you heard that term, Border Intel Center. That's a joint operation here for example, in McAllen. The other area we have is in Victoria, in the Sheriff's Department in Victoria, is where that one is. Mm-hmm. So we share the facility with the Border Patrol and their Border Patrol sectors, except Border Patrol has 5 sectors. We have 6 sectors because we include the coastal counties, coastal jurisdictions up to Corpus Christi, because that is a high threat corridor. So we've included that is a separate sector. And
so far, have the local law enforcement entities do they have the resources to help out in this regard?
Not in all cases. Not in all cases. Quite frankly, if you look across the border from Brownsville to El Paso, you have a varying degree of staffing at the local law enforcement effort. That's quite obvious. So what government works best is closest to the people. So we've created these Joint Operation Intel Centers in their area, so they are able to access those, and they do support those. They do a great job of support. What you're alluding to is the term we call augmentation, and that's to be able to sustain 24-hour operations along the border, and it is a challenge, and we're looking at many different things to do that. Texas Military Forces to be able to pick up some of those missions and do that to give them that respite they need.
Now, the federal law enforcement entities are participating?
Absolutely. If I can sort of go back to where we at, the we began border operations, as the chairman knows, back in June of 2006 with Operation, you hear these terms, Operation Rio Grande, Operation Wrangler, Operation Border Star. We've learned a lot in a year of operations. You always do. But the key to success has always been and will be operations coordinated at the local level and executed at the local level under local authority. And that's working well with us now.
Jack, real quick, can you share for us why the BICs that are already established by Border Patrol, that the joint intel centers that are now being established by the state is not a duplication of effort, and there is actually a metrics outcome based on the two entities.
Correct.
That there is a value-added metrics outcome that we can show, and why that isn't duplication of effort.
Absolutely. This has been a long road. This is not something you do by just simply saying you do it. You have to build relationships. You have to build respect. You have to build confidence between law enforcement agencies, state, federal, and local level. We've been doing this for over a year now. I'm happy to say, at least from the perspective of what we do, that has, and our great Texas military forces who supported us, both through Jump Start and as they are integrated into Border Star. So the Border Patrol has a distinct mission, and you heard that this morning. We're here to make them a success, make them a bigger success than what they are, because it speaks to what we're all focused on, and that's to reduce crime, improve quality of life along the border. So with that respect, the matrix you talk about, we have common goals to do that with, and being able to integrate operations quicker, faster, smarter than we've ever done before, and we're doing that. Regardless of what may be criticized or not criticized, we have moved that high bar up along the border in terms of our operations.
But we participate as a state law enforcement and local law enforcement within the existing BICs along the border.
That's correct.
So really, so now we create these JICs.
Well, the facility, you sort of get into what a facility is. The building itself is the location of the BIC, and that's where it's located. The Border Patrol runs operations every day, regardless of whether we're there or not. In that, when we do coordinated operations, that becomes a joint operations intel center, and that is a focused thing to coordinate local.
So those are mission specific, then? They're driven mission specific.
The mission specific pieces are run within the operational construct of the JOIC, which is clear. Border Patrol has people go out, come in every day. They do their daily missions, but when we come together in a joint operation, that's done under the JOIC, which is pretty much one and the same to do that. However, what the Border Patrol and what's changed, the paradigm that's changed, is that the Border Patrol now willingly, openly, and is very proactive in letting in the integration of what they do with what we do, both on the ground and in the air, which has made a big difference on the border. As well as, I might say, United States Coast Guard here, because we look at the Intercoastal Canal from here, from Brownsville up to Caucus, as a area of operation too. So it's not just taking what the Border Patrol does, it's taking what we collectively see across the border. And I might say we coordinate with the 5 counties in New Mexico also, because the impact it has when operations are run in the El Paso sector, it has in New Mexico. So we've come over the last year, since June of 2006, better at what we do. We're going to get much better because of the great resource the legislature has given us collectively in terms of funds to be able to refine these operations even more. There are challenges out there, no doubt about it, and the local law enforcement officers will tell you what they are, and that is to be able to sustain these operations.
I guess the reason I'm asking is because in terms of the command and control aspect of operations, who's in charge, Sarge, and understanding that the federal law enforcement agencies have their lane, and to the degree that we as the state are not stepping on any toes, either locally. I know because there was occasion when, Chairman, when we were driving operations based on we got to spend this money versus what was actual on the ground and what local law enforcement could actually support. You know, you got a guy that goes on a 2-week mission. He's going around the clock, but then, and you've got a small law enforcement. Just say, for instance, you had a San Benito, you had a 40-man force or whatever person force, and you know what's actual and so forth. So,
well, Mr. Chairman, you know, with your background, operations by nature are never 100% in terms of what you try to achieve. But saying all that, I think now, where we're at now on the border, as Colonel Davis has mentioned, the fact that in a unified command structure within that JOIC, we have a Texas Ranger who is accepted by federal, state, and local law enforcement as the coordinator of those operations has come a long way in being able to enhance us, and we're going to go much further with that. And the commitment by the department to put a ranger in each one of these joint operations center on full time. This is not a task, and this is a full time commitment by the department. Both put a ranger company on the border, but also put a ranger lieutenant full time in each one of these joint operation intel centers to do what they do best, and that's to coordinate these operations.
One of the things, I'm sorry, real quick, let me just ask you real quick, Jack, who produced this document?
I got your request from your office last night. I have no idea. We did not request that document.
Do you know Colonel Davis?
We didn't fund it. We didn't do anything.
It looks like a document that,
I'm sorry?
Fred Burton is the head of Stratford. It's a private,
How does the state, does that come out of your budget, or does that come out of Homeland Security budget? Does it come out of the burn grant? I mean, who? Because it wasn't.
We got your information last night, Mr. Chairman, and I have no knowledge. We have no funds of any type that go towards that document.
Yeah, I'm just curious because I was looking at this as a private contractor, and I mean it's a worthy document, but there's not any footnotes. It's not attributed. It's not bibliography or anything of that nature. And do you know where it came from? It's a private contractor, but it was presented to us.
Sit here on the board with
Chairman, is this
The name rang a bell. I think what's his name, Fred?
Fred Burton.
Yes.
He sits on the Border Security Council.
And I know that it isn't your. We all serve, in that capacity, you serve at the pleasure of the governor. And I'm curious why, because we've gotten into this issue last session with private contractors and spending our tax dollars with these private contractors as though they add value above and beyond what our local law enforcement professionals bring to the table, and that concerns me. And so, Judge, I'm not putting you on the spot. I'm just curious what value added a private contractor, or whatever we may be paying somebody, brings to the table that is superior or more knowledgeable than what DPS, Border Patrol, ATF, local law enforcement. What do they know that they don't know? And I don't know. You may be able to share.
I can't answer that question.
Okay. Gentlemen, y'all have any questions?
I've got some questions.
Chairman Escobar.
Thank you, Mr. Noriega. I want to thank you all for testifying before us. I do have a couple of questions. First off, Judge, I was a little older than you were when Hurricane Beulah hit the area.
You just look younger than I do, Juan.
Well, Judge, just want to make sure that since you alluded to all of us up here, Renee, I think, was in the 4th grade, and Eddie was not born. Veronica might have been in Pampers.
Thanks, Juan.
Well, that means that you're a lot younger than I am.
Not quite, but...
Everybody's too serious. Let's have a little smile, okay? I wanted to ask you a question on this moratorium that Senator Cronin has proposed. Did that pass, or is it just talk? What's going on with that?
Well, most things that happen in Washington are talk. I'm not sure. I just remember that when I spoke to him, he was going to make that recommendation, and I thought that was a good recommendation to make. And again, it's simply just to kind of put a halt on this until until the IBWC has an opportunity to look at what the impact and what the effects would be if they did make upgrades to the levee system.
I bring this up because of, I still feel that more manpower and more technology, more resources on the border would be more effective than the wall, based on.
I agree, and I don't think anyone's ever disputed that. But I also heard testimony earlier that it's going to take this is a crossword puzzle and all the pieces have to fit. But again, my concern is the levee system, and I think that would accomplish quite possibly the elimination of a wall. I still think we need to have boots on the ground. I still think we need to have, technology that comes into play. It's not just building the levee system and putting a gravel road on top of the levee system and have our border patrol with a direct line of sight. And it's going to take more than cutting down the Carrizo Cane. It's going to be a combination of things. What I'm suggesting is that in lieu of the wall, that the levee system be looked at.
And I agree with you, Judge. I think that it would be a more effective way of maintaining a smooth operation, and I think it's that we're heading that direction based on testimony I've heard so far from the Colonel as well as Border Patrol, that there seems to be a better communication system being established where there's joint operations to be more effective in combating the criminal activity on the border. Now, Colonel, on the
can I just go back a little bit?
Yes.
I think that one of the efforts that we're all trying to do here is develop partnerships. And as you well know, we've developed some partnerships with some of the South Texas county judges. Just the one issue that stands to mind right now is that of veterans issues.
That's right.
And I think the first month or so that I was in office, your county judge, Willacy County Judge, Cameron, and Hidalgo County Judge met to talk about issues that were important to South Texas. It had never been done before in terms just sitting down, having lunch, and talking about issues that brought us together versus those that pull us apart. But one of the issues, too, and again, we spoke about it last night, Renee, just a little bit, in terms of Mexico has to come to the table at some point. And maybe they've started that process already by activating some of their military. But they need to come to the table in terms of also patrolling their northern banks. And I think somebody mentioned a few minutes ago about a dirty bomb. And I think that in essence, just because we have the Rio Grande River is nothing but a street with water on it. And all we have here is someone that if Mexico does not do what they're supposed to be doing in terms of patrolling their northern border as well, they're suspect as well to terrorism attacks as well. And there's nothing to prevent somebody from detonating something on the northern bank of our river. And the way, as we know, with the breezes and the prevailing winds, have a significant impact on our community. And this happens between here all the way to El Paso. So as we go through these discussions, I would encourage you all to talk with your Mexican counterparts as well, and ask them for their continued support in terms of patrolling their northern border as well.
Thank you, Colonel. I need to ask you a question that I alluded to the Border Patrol. I made a personal privilege statement when I said that their journeyman level should be raised to a higher level to keep those agents in the force because of that experience that is very valuable. You train them and then after so many years they go to another agency because it's a better pay. Could you give us a little bit of an assessment as to what you feel your department is doing? Or do you feel, let me rephrase that. Do you feel that your department is as well losing a lot of very experienced DPS troopers after 3, 4, 5 years because of pay they go to another agency, whether it's federal or maybe another police department in the state like Houston that pays more money?
One of the things we're facing right now is Houston, Dallas, some of the larger agencies that are having the same problem as we're having recruiting, is they're paying bonuses to people, not necessarily just DPS, but other police agencies that are trained or licensed by TCLOs. If they come to work, Houston PD will pay them $10,000 bonus for signing with them. And it's kind of like being an athlete, I guess. But we've lost 3 people to Houston in that area down there. I don't see us losing that many to other police agencies. One of the things that we're losing now, people in West Texas and some in East Texas, we're losing them to the oil field. There's a big boom in the oil field, and they're making a lot of money working those kind of jobs. We lose some of our older people to security jobs and with companies, but our rate is not any higher than it's been several years ago in comparison to the number of people we have.
So the reason I ask this question, I think that this committee should be making some kind of a recommendation to the state legislature next session to look at the possibility of working on a different pay schedule for DPS, where you can be, because it all goes back to, these officers, they want to put bread and butter in their tables for their families and have a good retirement. So I'm asking that question because I think this body here, this committee, should be looking at doing some work in developing a system, a pay structure a little different for DPS, for people in law enforcement at the state level.
I would ask you to look at one area, and that's the city of Laredo. We have trouble getting people to go there because of the high economic costs there, the housing there, and the availability of jobs for spouses. That's something the federal government has a rate on different cities. We do not have that. As you know, we have a state law or a rider in our appropriations bill that allows us to pay for hardship stations, and that's $50 more a month. Not a lot of money, but I think we as state police, both us, Parks and Wildlife, Alcohol Beverage Commission, probably need some addition there as far as location pay. And you got the same thing in Houston. The only difference in people going to Houston is the availability of our troopers working extra jobs in Houston. They work all that we'll let them work, and they can make those, make that money up. But that's not true in Laredo. McAllen is we don't have that big problem getting people to go there, but Laredo's really the big problem right now.
Have you had an increase in the type of encounters that would be highly dangerous or life-threatening to DPS troopers? Has there been an increase of that because of the amount of crime that is filtered through the border and actually being able to go north, like on this corridor, which is known as the Gulf Cartel, which covers Highway 77, 281, and part of 35 from Laredo?
Well, one of the most famous things not famous, one of the saddest things, I guess, that's occurred at DPS officer in the last year is the shooting of our officer out of Tyler. It stopped two people that were in this country illegally, and he was knocked down, and they stood over him and shot at him 10 or 12 times, and luckily he survived. We've seen an increase in attacks on our officers, and we try to in those areas, and especially on these task forces that we're running, we got people that are so close together that even if we're working one person, one trooper units, that we have somebody in the ability to respond. But yes, I think all police have seen a increase in violence, and I think we're concerned, and part of our intelligence briefing is the briefing of our troopers that are especially from other parts of the state, if they come to McAllen, Brownsville, or someplace, to try to educate them on the hazards and what to look for, and that's part of the job of our intelligence and narcotics motor vehicle theft people.
So if the state, with this money that was allocated, even though that Judge Caso alluded to something that's very important, that this is a one-time deal, I think personally that we should be continuing the efforts where we continue putting this type of money in the budget if we want to be effective in stopping the criminal activity on the border. So by increasing the manpower that you have gotten allocated, 106 troopers, 4 helicopters, a company of rangers, or all of this here is an enhancement of manpower, and so what I would ask you is that in your opinion, and I don't know if you can answer this because it might be a political answer here, that the legislature should look very closely at continuing this type of funding continuously and not just a one-time situation.
Well, I think in the DPS side, and it is not a political issue. Part of the other money that was given for overtime, but the DPS part for the personnel, that's built in our baseline budget. The only thing that's not guaranteed is the replacement of those aircraft when they wear out, but the salary, the operating, and all that stuff is built into our baseline budget. So it's there, barring some kind of reduction in budget appropriations. We're funded for that from now on.
And now I have a question for Mr. Collier in reference to some of the statements that you made. I just want to ask a quick question. When you report your statistics to the state and through your intelligence, are there any duplications of numbers? For example, does Border Patrol, if you work in an operation with Border Patrol and they apprehend 20 people, do you also report them as well?
Well, we give credit. What we do identify where the report came from. So it's not if Border Patrol apprehends 20 people, then Border Patrol is identified as apprehending 20 people, not the state apprehending 20 people. So we've been able to work together now. I think the good news is when we started this, over a year ago, we were still trying to build relationships, but now I think it's a seamless effort. And so we don't duplicate effort. There's not an attempt to do that. It's the focus right now is obviously, statistics drive what numbers drive, but the focus is reduce crime and focus on the goal, which is to do these things. But we share both intelligence now and we share numbers in terms of what those mean. So the report that's done now that comes out is a joint report. It's not a state report, if you will.
The reason I'm asking that question is I want to make sure that we're specific as to the kind of apprehensions we're making, and that it's not duplicated to alarm people to a degree that they overreact, which is in many ways, and I'm not saying that it's come from your agency, but there's been an alarming number of people in the House of Representatives away from the border that don't understand how things work over here, that they feel, there are just too many numbers up there. And so I want to make sure that we're specific with the numbers, that we have Border Patrol doing this type of apprehensions. We're working jointly with them. We collaborated, we assisted, versus also we did our own in the operation. We did our own apprehensions.
And I think that's why we've gone to a decentralized operations work best where they're decentralized, and so these JOICs are very important to that. And that's working well now.
Thank you very much. I want to thank you all for your testimony.
Just a quick question. Gentlemen, you talk about this joint operation. Right now, how is it handled when you're talking about an undocumented person being stopped, let's say, by DPS? How is that handled in terms of getting the Border Patrol involved? Because I know that there's a separation of rights and powers there that they can have. So what do y'all do when there's a stop?
Right. As you know, without federal training, state and local agencies are not permitted to enforce immigration laws. If we DPS stop a person on a traffic violation or in a stolen vehicle or something, we have a criminal charge on that person. We will either write them a notice to appear, probably not, probably incarcerate them, and if it's determined that that person is in this country illegally, we'll notify the Border Patrol. If we let's say we stop a vehicle and there's 3 other people in that car, okay? We have the driver, we have a criminal charge on him, he's going to go with us. The other 3, if we're in an area and we determine that they're here illegally, and we can get a hold of the Border Patrol and they respond in a reasonable time. And reasonable time in downtown Brownsville may be 15 minutes. In Cotulla, it may be an hour. So whatever's reasonable, if we'll hold that person for the Border Patrol, because we have no charges, we have no legal cause to detain other than just till the Border Patrol gets there, but we have no authority to arrest. So if the Border Patrol can get there in a reasonable time, we'll hold them for them. If not, we'll let them go.
Okay, and so and you make that determination by asking for identification, or is it just done by certain factors you look at?
we don't ask for legal presence documentation. I think in our people are skilled enough in talking, they can determine if they're here. If they have no identification, they don't have any kind of license or anything, it's pretty easy to assume that they are, and most of the time it's an assumption, and I know that's probably not the best identification policy, but it is, and that's really about the best we can do under those circumstances.
Representative Wilson?
Kind of to piggyback with Representative Gonzalez, what if there's certain suspicion that there may be terrorist type of activities? For instance, you pull over a car, there's certain materials in the car that have been known to be used to make bombs or used to create some type of device. DPS pulls that person over. I mean, they can't say for sure what those materials are used for. Some of them are household materials, everyday materials, but in combination with other things could create, hazardous weapons. At that point, do you bring in, some of the federal agencies? I mean, how quickly do you respond to that? I mean, is an arrest made then and there? Arrest, ask questions later, or how is that?
Okay, let's assume the person's by themselves and there's material in there that would could be used, and our officer has been trained to recognize those type materials as potential ingredients of an explosive device. First off, they're going to have a violation of the law, or they wouldn't have stopped them. Okay. They just don't stop them to look in their car. Speeding, okay? That's a violation of the law. At that time, if that's all they have, and they know the ingredients of a bomb, or they know the state law about what is an explosive device, and if that doesn't meet that form I was talking about a while ago, that Intelligence 7, that's filled out and that's sent to the intelligence service, they will continue that investigation to determine if that person has any record, any known association, and the trooper at that time would run a criminal history and driver's license check, and all those checks that may alarm them if that was a wanted person.
So let's say they have the form, and I don't know if it's a checklist maybe, and they're going down that form, they're going down that checklist, and there's certain things on that form that are met, whether it's
right.
materials in the car, certain physical behavior, what have you. Once that list is filled out, if a certain amount of the criteria is met, are they allowed to arrest at that point and detain?
No.
So
what you're describing is reasonable suspicion. If they have reasonable suspicion of something that they would like someone else to investigate, since they don't have a violation of the law, if they have probable cause for arrest. Well, if the person under the state law, if you're stopped for speeding and you agree to sign the ticket and you have a valid license and all that, I'm required to give you a ticket and let you go. If the trooper believes that strongly in that there's some material there that could be used as an explosive device, certainly it's within their discretion to call a federal agency or a local bomb squad or something to further investigate. If they can respond in a reasonable time, since he has no custody arrest authority under that bill. If they stopped him, if he didn't have a driver's license, it'd be pretty easy to make a custody arrest, take them in, and then call someone and have them go through the vehicle.
Okay. Colonel, real quick, you just took over the TDEX operation, is that
yes,
correct?
Yes, we're in the process
that
of doing
database,
that.
getting that cleaned up and whatnot?
Yes, sir.
Do you know if we ever resolved the issue because Mr. McCraw, I assume he was busy today or out of town or wasn't able to come before the committee? Do you know, Jack?
I don't know. I can't remember Colonel Davis.
Okay. That if based on the protocols that we know there were questions about during the session of handing over data to a private firm, and then we didn't get that data back. Do you know if we ever received that data back from that private firm
It's my belief we did. That was a test project that criminal law enforcement was involved in, and it was separate from the TDEX. Although there is a contractor, APRIS, on the TDEX side, the information belongs to us and readily accessible and available for us to get at any time.
Jack, do you know off the top of your head maybe on with criminal justice burn dollars in Cameron County, since we're here, Cameron or even Hidalgo, up to this point, what have we been able to do for local law enforcement in terms of burn dollars in this area?
I don't have that with me, Mr. Chairman. I can certainly get it for you. It's just a matter of a phone call.
It may be something y'all would want to know in terms of those CJ dollars that have flowed through to the local law enforcement.
That's really available.
You guys want to know.
And I know that our chief of police will probably speak to that, but we definitely need more money for burn dollars for burning of drugs. And in fact, there was a bill that passed, that passed committee, got out of committee, just didn't make it to the floor in time for a vote. But
well, the only thing
for more dollars.
The only thing that we would be able to give you is what is for border
right.
operations as opposed to other burn grants, which are other law enforcement grants, right. Not associated with what we do here with the border.
I'm not sure I understood you, but were you talking about disposing of narcotics?
The disposing of narcotics.
Right. There was an appropriations passed. The DPS has
for the facility.
Yeah. Well, we're in the process of negotiating now. TCEQ has approved our permit, and we're going to build a trench burner that will be able to dispose of that.
And that facility is here in Cameron, I believe.
Yeah.
Maybe in Starr County.
Starr. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay. What is the target date for that?
Give me 6 months, and that's a guess.
Sounds right.
Right, and that's going to alleviate them having to take it to North Texas or wherever they were taking it to. But it will be within, 30, 40 miles of McAllen.
I just want to make a real quick, Jack and Chairman, just as a real quick observation, just for food for thought, two things. One is that in terms of direct support of civilian authorities dealing with guard personnel, military personnel are never going to tell you they can't do something. They're always going to tell you that they can, regardless of the circumstance. You're going to, snap to and make it happen. I have to share with you from a personal experience, and my colleagues are aware too, that something that we can all work on together. When we do the different operations and request an additional guard personnel, I think as a legislature and all of us together need to look at how we look at the benefits aspect. And when you're called up on state orders, unless you're injured, you are not covered with any kind of medical, any kind of retirement. And so as a result, if that soldier, and many of them, Judge, y'all have them here with 3 of the 141 out of Weslaco, a lot of these kids will volunteer for a 2-week mission or a 1-month mission, but we've got to look at a way of compensating these kids when they take on this mission, because sometimes they will get paid more than if they work just a regular civilian job. But at the same time, their families or that individual soldier is not covered by the state with medical or any kind of retirement. Only in the event that they get injured, then they'll be covered by workers' comp. But that's it. So it's something that legislatively we can work on together next go around to look at taking care of these folks as they may be asked to do more missions, for instance. Unlike Operation Jumpstart, which is driven federally, and so then it's a different set of orders, and that's a different circumstance altogether. But I will tell you this as well. I've got about 40-something guys that are still on Jumpstart. And much like the unit here in Weslaco that just returned from a deployment, they're wore out. Their families, their kids, their wives, and many of them will be going back into the breach in about 36 months. And So when we are doing state missions, we need to be cognizant, too, that we do put those folks at risk. The teams I got to build to get them back prepared so that nothing happens to them in about 36 months, it does pull away from that team building for a real world mission. And so I just be cognizant of that, just in terms of what we are adding additional compounding stress on these families and so forth when we do want Guard personnel to do the mission. They'll always do the mission, but there's a competing stress component that is in play, and I just want to share that with you because y'all have, as we move forward, that we should be concerned. And you got a lot of kids down here, Judge Cameron, Hidalgo, that are answering the call. So that's just a statement.
And just as a follow-up, and I concur with you. I think that's an excellent point. If we want to take it to the federal level, where some of our kids, young men and women, are overseas, it's funny because they kind of go through a boot camp. They go in and they go out, and then when they come back, there's no decontamination type resource. They come back after their term or their tour of duty. And they come back, and they're just expected to fly home and go home and take up where they left off. So there's no mechanism in place right now to give these young men and women an opportunity to reacclimate to before they come home. So that's something that we may want to consider also at the local level as well. So I appreciate your comments, Mr. Chairman.
The other thing, Judge, too, I was just thinking, I think we've seen a shift as well, or announcement by the administration in the last week or so about the zero tolerance effort that was, I guess it was in Del Rio, and this may be more of a BP observation. But there may be some strain on local authorities in terms of detention facilities. I know within the judiciary, I don't know, there's some in discussion if there are enough judges in the area to facilitate the zero tolerance that was discussed by the administration. And it's something that we all need to be cognizant of as well as things move forward. Members, any other questions or?
I don't know if y'all know, but is the detention facility, is it already, is it full? Right now, the detention facilities we do have for undocumented, I don't know, maybe someone in...
Is that the one that's in the Bayview facility?
Yes.
I don't know.
Okay.
That's federal.
Yeah, I thought maybe somebody here might know. Cause
I can tell you that our jail is always full.
I know, so is ours.
Mr. Chairman, could I respond?
Yes, sir, please.
What we've asked for, and this goes back to discussions we had with you previous, we've asked for 150 Title 32 slots. I don't know if you know that or not, but we've asked for those. Create 3 32-man security platoons and place 36 Texas Military Force personnel in the JOICs, and not in each JOIC, but across that. That's ongoing, and that's. So we're in the process of doing that. The Adjutant General is doing that now.
And I know, Jack, you're familiar with the sensitivity of the command and control of those kids.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Representative, do you have anything else? Jack, great job with and Colonel, the response to the Dean threat. I know we mustered some packs to get them down here, the buses, and Judge, everybody pulling together to make sure that we exercise the plan, looked at the shortcomings and how to make it better in the event something like that may hit us again. And thank you, Colonel, for your work, and thank you, Judge, for taking the time. Members, any other?
Thank you, Judge. Thank you for the detail, your work you're doing on this, and Colonel, we appreciate all you're doing, and thank you all very much.
Thank you all.
And as we go forward, I mean, just think too how we might move forward. If we have any recommendations for legislative change next go around, how we can support that. Thank you. Folks, we're going to